Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about the Lakers versus Grizzlies playoff matchup and kind of what to expect, what to look out for, and the mindset going into this series from both teams and the teams' fan bases. And I also wanted to touch a little bit on what the media's spin is on this series. A lot of the time, the media gets so much stuff wrong, and they never really get called out on it, or it kind of just gets forgotten once it's over. But I do want to touch on that. For To start, I wanted to talk about the most crucial aspect of this series going into it. And this is probably not going to be a surprise, but I think the number one most crucial aspect is going to be the health of the superstars on each team. So obviously in 2021, the Lakers were up 2-1 against the Phoenix Suns, and Anthony Davis goes down. And they end up losing that game, and then they end up losing to the Suns in 6, handing LeBron his first round loss in his entire career. So, after that, the perception, the arguments from Lakers fans was basically like, hey, if Anthony Davis never got hurt, not only were the Lakers going to win that series, but because the Suns ended up making it to the NBA Finals, it's like that the Lakers, they were the defending champions, right? They could have very well gone on to the finals that year against the Bucks, and we don't know how that would have turned out. The Bucks would probably have been the favorites, just again maybe because of health, but the Lakers would have had a case anyway. So that's kind of the mindset that the Lakers have going into this entire run is going to be, hey, like we need to stay healthy. I know LeBron James obviously has this foot issue, but he seems relatively healthy. So the mindset is like, hey, as long as we can operate, as long as we can actually be on the court, we probably have a chance against anybody. But then that also kind of applies to the Memphis Grizzlies. They were eliminated in the second round last year against the defending championship Warriors because Ja Morant was out for half that series. And yeah, they played well without Ja Morant in the regular season, and they did put together some good quarters and good halves of basketball against the Warriors without Ja Morant. Obviously, if you lose a series and your best player is not playing, you're not going to feel satisfied. You're not going to feel like that was a fair loss by any stretch. So, the Grizzlies are back with a vengeance this season, and Desmond Bane is still playing phenomenal. Jaren Jackson Jr. has taken another leap. He's just a phenomenal player for them. So I think kind of both teams, they have unfinished business, not with each other, but just in like the postseason in general. They want to send some messages, and this first round matchup is going to be the way that they do it. If the Lakers lose, and assuming everyone's healthy, if the Lakers lose, I think it's going to have huge effects in the offseason. I think depending on how D'Lo plays, D'Lo might not even be on the team. If he plays incredibly well, then they're going to say, okay, run it back. We can get a higher seed because this whole team was put together pretty much overnight. But if they lose badly and, D'Lo, for example, is just a no-show for this series, that leaves them with serious questions going into this offseason. And, despite LeBron being 38, this discussion, it's like a meme, right? Or like, how does this affect LeBron's legacy? I think that's going to be the conversation more than what it will be about, like, if the Grizzlies just best them in a series. No one's going to give the Grizzlies credit, unfortunately. A lot of it's just going to be hanging on LeBron's shoulders. But that's just kind of how every LeBron series is since he's started making the postseason. But yeah, that's kind of what I think is going to be one of the deciding factors is health. Another deciding factor, I think, is going to be the matchup. Anthony Davis versus either Tillman or Jaren Jackson Jr., depending on who they have guarding him most of the time. The problem is, like, obviously with Jaren Jackson Jr., one of his biggest flaws is the number of fouls he's been committing, right? And that's been a storyline for the whole season. But what kind of accentuates that is the Lakers are like the number one team in drawing foul calls. And, Anthony Davis goes to the line a bunch a game. I think he's averaging like 8 free throws a game, something like that. I could be off. But you have a team that goes to the line a lot, And then you have a team that fouls a lot, or at least one of their key players that fouls a lot. So right there is a mismatch that I think the Lakers are going to aim to take advantage of in some capacity. Now, the problem with that sort of matchup is that it's very NBA referee dependent. And for anyone who's watched the league for a number of years, I mean, it's no secret that NBA refs are just, honestly, they're just terrible. I think it's very hard to plan around them. A lot of the time, you don't know what they're going to call. The calls aren't made consistently. So if your game plan is to go in and say, okay, we're going to draw a bunch of fouls against Jaren Jackson Jr. and Anthony Davis, you're going to be the linchpin of this offense. It's like, that sounds like a great game plan, but if the refs decide to swallow their whistles for a game, then you better have a backup plan, because if that's the case, it's like if it's going to be a super physical game and Jaren Jackson Jr. can get away with, 8-9 fouls a game, then that puts a different spin on this series. But on paper, as it stands, when you just kind of look at that matchup, that seems to be a matchup that favors the Lakers. And with Steven Adams out, who is a way more skilled and experienced big man, it's going to put the pressure on Tillman, and it's going to put the pressure on Jaren Jackson Jr. to perform and to elevate their game and play like a smarter defensive game. Although, like I said, I mean, sometimes it's like, doesn't matter how smart you play it, the refs are just going to call what they want to call. I feel like refs call so often based on a player's reputation more than what they're actually seeing. Anthony Davis is going to get a bunch of calls, regardless of if he's actually fouled or not. And I mean, that's a topic for a whole other video about refs being incompetent in the NBA. I know that's a very popular opinion amongst players, fans, pretty much everybody. But yeah, I mean, I think that is a crucial element of this series. And finally, it's like the last thing I did want to touch on, just for this matchup anyways, is like the media spin on this sort of stuff. I kind of hinted at it earlier where, let's say the Lakers lose. The Grizzlies aren't going to get credit for this, right? They're not going to get credit. No one's going to talk about the Grizzlies. No one's going to say, oh, they did a great defensive job on Anthony Davis or LeBron or whatever. All they're going to talk about is, how does this affect LeBron's legacy? What does this mean for the Lakers? Blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, the Grizzlies, they're just not going to get respect unless they actually go and win a title, or, I mean, at the very least, make it to the finals. That's just the state of NBA media as a whole. But another issue is what the kind of the groundwork that has been laid for if the Lakers do win. Because, everyone's picking the Lakers to go against the Grizzlies and win that series. I don't know if everybody's picking it, but the majority of media members kind of are. And they're kind of laying the groundwork for it's like, okay, let's say the Lakers do win. They're not going to really get any credit. No one's, it's going to say, oh, they were supposed to beat the Grizzlies, blah, blah, blah. Even though they're the 7th seed going up against the 2nd seed. The narrative is going to be that they were supposed to beat them no matter what. And if they lose, it's going to be a disaster, right? So it's kind of a lose-lose for the Lakers. And the problem with that is this has been the tone that has been used to describe the post-trade deadline Lakers since the trade deadline. There's just hasn't been a consistent narrative about what they are. I mean, obviously, if you're a fan of the Lakers, you can see the team is a different team now than it was post-trade deadline. But a lot of the other people in the media have refused to kind of make that leap. A lot of them still see them as a 13th seed. And you hear a lot of stats, the last time, there's only been one time in history where the 7th seed has upset the 2nd seed and moved on in the playoffs, and it's the Spurs, blah, blah, blah. It's that does not apply. This Lakers team has I believe it's the 2nd best record in the league post-trade deadline. So, what does that tell you? That tells you that it's a different team than the team that was in the 13th spot pre-deadline. So you can't use, they're not a typical 7th seed. They just aren't. So I think that narrative needs to kind of go away. I think the final thing, obviously we got a lot of media talk about Ja Morant and his personal issues throughout the year and, what his time away from the team meant and how he dealt with it, so on and so forth. I'd be interested to see if the Grizzlies do make a serious run, if they make it to the finals, or if, they actually pull it off and win a championship, what does Ja Morant's controversy throughout the year, how does that play into his story as a player? Because there's a lot of young players in the league. Someone I compare Ja Morant too, even though their play styles are very different. I kind of compare him to Luka and Trae Young in a sense that, like, they can get the assists, he can get the points. Maybe he doesn't get as many rebounds as Luka, let's say. It's just like he's kind of one of the younger players, a lot of buzz behind him, a lot of talent, a lot of offensive talent. And the team around him has actually outperformed both Trae Young and Luka, right? Especially this year. So if he's able to get to the finals or win the finals, like, what does that do for his legacy? Does he kind of start building his own legacy going forward? Because while he's a respected player, I feel there's a lot of work to be done before he's actually entered into the conversations with some of his contemporaries. So that's going to be something interesting to look at. But that's going to be down the road. That's just not just going to come from one series against the Lakers, because like I said, even if they beat the Lakers, that's going to be a postmortem on the Lakers as a season, as a team, and their season as a whole. It's not going to be like, oh wow, look what a great job Ja did, right? Similar to the 2011 finals. Everyone talks about LeBron in the 2011 finals. No one talks about the Mavs and that team and what they were able to accomplish. So I don't think the Grizzlies are going to get the respect they deserve as a team unless they actually at least make the finals. But that's going to be an interesting story arc. So that's something to look out for. Anyway, those are my thoughts. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you think.